Okay, it's time for a recap of these last 4 episodes have been about shooting the screen door, the inaugural or the first shots for effect on my first project, which is the one pieced together out of parts. The ones that I would show, I feel, are going to have the least chance of making the standards that I've set for myself. And I just want to share with you what I feel that I've learned, because remember, in my opinion, not in my opinion, the reason I'm doing this particular part is to use this huge case to illustrate, to test, to validate a lot. We started with PPCs. Well, PPCs are really easy. I've got a bunch out there, and one of these days, if time permits and I have to, I'm going to go out and bang some groups and compare them and show tuning. That's a whole different thing. I moved up into the mid-range stuff. My primary focus here is taking PPC. I had 2 things when I started. Number 1, to make a bolt-in PPC shoot like a glue-in, thereby helping to validate the ideas of why the PPC works. It's not a magic cartridge. It's just that due to the way you make it, you end up with good brass. But you can make good brass for a lot of things. The trick to making good brass is to jam fit. And I worked my way up all the way through this. I've been working my way up and working my way all the way up to big 338s. And pretty easy for me to make a big 338 shoot quarter minute. Quarter minute's not bench rest accuracy, but it's superlative hunting accuracy. And somewhere in this, the weather got nasty, so I decided to blow into this BMG project, remembering that my focus is always on the whys of good accuracy. First of all, what is good accuracy? Second of all, how do you get it, and why does it work? And I use the PPC to illustrate things all the time. But we've managed to move up into a bunch of hunting rifles in earlier episodes, and all of a sudden, due to the rain and the whatever, I decided I'm going to take this 50BMG project off the back burner and just go right to the top. Start really overplaying these stresses. And that's what I've been doing, and in the meantime I just realized after this last few episodes that I started to lose focus for a minute. I left off the last time saying that I had to go shoot a little bit more with the screen door, but basically I was moving on to another project and I was going to shoot some. Well, I only moved to one gun. I moved next step up to one of my billet projects with the holes in the stock. I call it my holy. And I had to do some, basically it's the stock with the strips on, it's this stock right here. It's all stripped back down to nothing again. All that's changed is I've cut the keel completely off. So I have to understand, what this is for is to learn and to illustrate that learning. What are we learning from this? So I'm going to step back to the screen door for a minute because I ended up tearing this thing apart and changing direction. I've got other stuff going. This, well, I'm not going to pick this up. I'll pan down to it in a minute. I stripped this thing back down to the guts. It had plates on the side. I was complaining about the look. I wasn't liking it, but I'm trying to stiffen it. So I went back to the screen door. Bottom line is, evening came around, I had some time. I went out and shot some more groups with the screen door. Now remember, these are the first shots. This group is on video. This group, it's only 2160, but it was wild ES, like 2160 to 2240 was the extreme spread on this thing. It was 205 grains, 66 thou off the lens. I had said it was a 30-some thou. Well, I went and measured it later, and it was actually 60, so it's jumping. So that's not good. But I rode this thing down. This first load that I did was light. It's around 2,200 feet per second, and I rode it down hard, and I got an acceptable group with wild ES. So I bumped it up to 220 grains. I ran it up, and first shot hurt me a little bit, so I backed out of it, and I shot this group. Doesn't matter what I was feeling or whatever, but it was slapping me. A little faster, and I decided to drop back down to 210, but by now I was sore. As I've said before, I hate recoil. I think I could have held this one down and got it a little tighter, so after the videos were over, I decided to go out and try. Played with free recoil. I stayed at that 2,200-ish feet per second. And I also fired another gun, so there's one extra hole in here. But this is hard. I'm used, oddly enough, filming on camera is very different than, it's not like a mirror. So I'm working back and forth across my target. And let's just say these groups are all at the 22, I just picked, again, so far I've done nothing twice, except that here I kept the load the same. I went, oh, let me look here, loading. For these ones, I kept the load the same, and it was 206 or 208 grains. At one point in one of the videos I say 108, 105 because my brain just can't wrap around this 200 and some grains. But no, it's 200 and some odd grains. And in this case, I believe it's 206. And I have a tendency to misspeak when I don't have my notes, but I don't like reading to you. I'm just telling you, I try to remember this stuff. Suffice it to say that it was around 2,200 feet per second, but the ES was all over the place. Like 80 feet per second. And on one of those videos, smoke curled up, and I'm going along, and I'm like, man, I don't know if I busted a primer or what. I'm not used to smoke curling up. I also don't think very fast. So I decided, well, because I'm tearing this thing down, and basically what happened was I put an iron on it to melt a bunch of the epoxy, because I epoxied it together. And I had nothing to do, so I decided to go out and shoot some more. And I played with seating depth, and these are identical groups. These three groups are the same. I ran out to touch, and I got a solid jam, and then I backed off. So two of these are at a solid jam. This one is at a slightly less of a jam. And finally, at the end of the day, I decided to man up and lean into it. No, I went backwards. I'm sorry. It's this way. Stupid mirror. I need to look down here. Bam, bam. But to me, these groups are the same. Bam, again, not much different. Finally, I decided to do one thing different. I changed the seating depth. These two are at a slightly less of a touch. This one is closer to a jam. I decided to lean down into it again. And the result was this, which again is close to, it's not, let's just say, it's similar to this. Not similar, but I guess I can convince myself. It's not throwing big blasted flyers. So as I left off on the video, I'm saying, hey, time to work on the bags. I got to get the bags, because my bags, I'm whining and grunting and groaning about my bags. And in the meantime, I fired this guy. The first time I ever fired it, I had the forend just like this, and I had a big keel down here that was angled, because I was still in tune with the idea that these are hunting guns. These aren't bed rest guns. These are guns that, yeah, I can take out to a POS match or something, or I could shoot 1,000 yards because the standards aren't too high. But essentially, they're hunting guns. So, I wanted this forend to be a little more svelte, as they say. And I want it light, and it is all of those things. This billet is pretty light. The problem is with that big keel, and the barrel sitting way up here, I actually fired 4 groups with this, and I fired, these are full house now. Which brings us to something else that I misspoke on my last video. Full house on the screen door is around 2,400, 2,500. mainly because then it's starting to beat you up so bad and it's starting to bounce around so bad. This was just a teeny bit heavier, but suffice it to say, I have a bigger brake on it. That's the biggest difference is this one has a big monkey of a brake on it. So I only fired this gun with full house loads. None of this 2200 foot per second stuff. And I noticed that they were coming in at between 25 and 2600 feet per second. But they were shooting groups consistently that were shaped like this. I shot 4 groups like that and they're 3 inches, 3 inches, maybe even 4 inches, I mean, they're like this, wide, and they're all frowny faces. The gun is rocking back and forth, in my opinion. That's what I'm sharing with you right now, is these are the things that we've got to fix. So, the little whole screen door gun, I'm not going to fix it with bags. I'm going to fix it with counterweights. Because as I'm wrapping everything up, I went up to the house and I'm looking through these videos just looking for all the screw-ups I did. I won't edit it, but I'll mention some of it. See if I did something really weird or, you know, my pants fell down or I passed gas or something. And I realized I'm losing my way here. I started talking about no, these things have to shoot off a rolled up coat. The kicker with a good PPC, the way you can tell a good PPC from a bad PPC is if you've got a PPC and you've got to babysit that thing and you got to worry and you got to get and you got to lean and you got to, that means the gun is not free recoil. And to me that normally means the barrel's out of time. It's kicking funny. When you got to hold a gun a certain way to make it shoot, it may well still be competitive because you can remember to do that under the controlled conditions of a bench rest match. It'll shoot bug holes. But it's no good in the field. Now, because I have bench rest guns built by a bunch of different builders, some of them are very, very tractable. I've used the comment before that I could throw one of mine on a rolled up coat, tie a string to it, and hook a kitten to it, and when the kitten fired the gun, I'd hit where I wanted to. And then I could set it up, do it again and again and again. I'm saying the gun's very tractable. It just, boom, it rides the lightning and it does everything that I need. It's perfect. All of these need to do that. The fact that I can contain them with bags or get down is not the point. I have to build the guns in such a way that they contain themselves. So that's a change. Now, one of the things that I learned, I was whining about that bad ES and I was seeing the smoke. Well, I got back up to the house and sat down and was thinking and I realized that smoke coming up was from inconsistent burn. It's tied to the bad ES. You can't get good extreme spread unless you're ramped up and hammering. So when I went out and shot this guy, because of the bigger brake, I was able to get down on it and shoot it. Full house loads, none of this 2200 foot per second stuff, 2500, 2600. And it's shooting these big rocky groups. And I know they're you know, a bullet apart, but they're backing and forth, and I know it's from torque. I've seen it before. I've set up so many keels before that when a gun is torquing, you got a problem. So again, I started thinking about bags and I went, wait a minute. Wait just a freaking minute here. My job is to build tractable guns that will shoot in the field. So we're back to square one. What I'm doing now is I'm adding a big keel. I think I could pick this up. This assembly here. I'm trying something different because this goes on the side of this gun and it's going to make it 5 inches wide. I'm going to turn this into a conventional big bore gun. 5 inches wide, tapering back, something we can still carry, but something that will go on my 5. Also that 5 inches wide will lay on a rolled up coat or a backpack and it'll give it a riding surface. I need to get rid of this. And you'll notice I took the keel clear off. I whacked it. So, aesthetically, it looks better now than it did before already from what I've done. So, I'm not as mad about that. But the biggest thing is, this one, Only the screen door have I backed down, and I realized I'm shooting myself in the foot. I might have to go to Trail Boss or something, because somehow I need to get the burn back up. Because you know what happened? I fired 4 groups through this thing, and the ES, the first set I fired, was pretty much just a fine. I'm burning up. I've got this whole box of ammo back here, which is military grade something or another crap that I got for like $1 a round. I don't know, in today's market. So I always shoot 3 with this just to find out where I am, and the group I shot with this looked exactly like the groups I shot with my hand loads, because then I turned around and hand loaded that case, or that set of 3 cases, and then I hand loaded 3 Hornady's. I shot 4 groups at targets, and they all looked like a frowny face. And they were all about this wide. 3 to 4 inches wide. I say this, I mean, they just look terrible to me because I'm not used to that. But they were, you know, 10 bullets wide or whatever, 4 or 5 inches. I probably have 1 or 2 here, but I just didn't even want to walk down. No. One of them is actually in this group. These are from different... I should really run a camera down there because I shoot groups all over. I put up blueprints. I've got a whole, and I shoot here and I shoot there, and I bore sight another one in. But, long story short, I decided, and I'm back to stopping on the screen door and deciding that the way that gun is set up, I'm going to leave it at as a low velocity setup, and I'm going to play with that. If I keep it around 2200, I know I can make it shoot at 2200. And at 2200, I could still ride it down and not hurt myself. It's always easy to add weight. These got channels all over them. I can add lead, I can put golfers, I got all kinds of ways to add weight, but I don't want to. That gun is light. So I've got a whole series of testing to go, and honestly, at 2200, it still puts 2 solid tons on an elk at 1,000 yards. And it's got the wind drift of nothing. 44 inches of wind drift at 1,000 yards with a full-on 10-mile-an-hour wind. Now, I use wind drift just so that I don't sound pedantic. Wind drift is actually a drag function. The wind is not blowing the bullet over, and I need to be clear on that I understand it. A bullet flying through the air has to stay balanced. If the wind goes, it has to stay balanced, just like a top. Because that's how bullets work. They're weight rearward. If you remember an old-fashioned top, I doubt there's anybody ever going to watch this that's old enough to know how to throw a top. It used to be a wooden top. Go on YouTube and look at throwing tops. They're very heavy up top, very skinny down here. You throw them with a string and they hit and they, whoa, they're wobbling like crazy. That's called nutation. But because they're weight up from their nose, turn it sideways, it's a bullet riding on the wind. You got to have the weight and the bulk back here, and it will clear itself up and fly better. There are new tops now, competition tops, where they put the weight down in a pear shape, but it has to be turned on a lathe. It has to be perfectly balanced. It's a whole different, ruby tips, and we don't want to go there. Suffice it to say that wind drift, though, is the result of the bullet having to react to what it feels. In a dead calm air, it's going straight into the air in a dead calm day. As soon as there's a wind, in effect it tilts, the bullet tilts. And as it's pounding through the wind, it's slowing down, which is from, let's call it suction at its base. This isn't right. When you steer the bullet over and the base sucks, it sucks it downwind. I just want you to think about that next time you're trying to figure out how it works. The bullet turns to balance on the wind vector that it feels, and it sucks its own self downwind from deceleration. So, these big bullets, just remember that wind drift is a drag function, and a drag function is always the resultant sum of, well, let's not go there. A drag function is it's the bullet backing, it's the bullet slowing down, it's the bullet losing velocity. The more velocity, doesn't matter how fast the bullet starts, as it loses velocity, it drifts further downwind. These bullets have got a high BC, or just over 1, therefore they lose very little velocity. So it doesn't matter if you start them at 2800 or 2200. The wind drift is still not going to be much. They're not going to lose a lot of velocity. In fact, the faster bullet might lose a little more velocity in some cases. But in any case, it's the velocity loss that causes that wind drift. and these don't lose much. So understand, the screen door, 2200, still usable. This gun that had the keel on it, I was calling it Holy, or because all the holes, or Keely because of all the keel, or Stripey, or no, I don't even have a name for it. I'm going another way. I'm now going to make it big and wide because this is a full load, full house load gun. Just because that puts a lot more power downrange, and it allows you to shoot factory. Shooting factory out of that light gun at this point where it sits hurts like crazy. Now, here's what I noticed in shooting full. The first thing that happened was I put those military things in and I got about 50 feet per second ES, 70 feet per second ES. But the hand loads were 14 and 18 or something. I've been saying this for 20 years, and I don't know why I don't listen to my own stuff. Maybe I don't believe it. I have always said that extreme spread only occurs high up in the velocity envelope. You gotta run them hard to get the ES down. Well, that was immediately apparent. I jumped these up to full speed, 2,600-ish feet per second. And while I'm doing that, I remember that on the video I said, well, I proof tested at 26. That's interesting. I had to go back to my notes because I'm still not in my head. I don't have a velocity picture yet of the way these things act. I know the screen door shoots best right now at 2200, but the ES is all over because I can't get it to burn hard. So I stepped up to this, I started burning hard, the ES shrunk right down to where it was supposed to be, but it's rocking back and forth. There's two of the problems. But, long story short, I decided to go back and look up the screen door, and the proof load I don't know if you can read that, but this goes back to when I did it. It weren't 2600. It was 2854 out of a 28-inch barrel. It was 250 grains of RL50. So, 2,850 feet per second. That would have been 33,000 or something, 3,100 out of a long barrel. So just letting you know, I'm just rechecking the numbers. This is a learning thing. I'm documenting it so that hopefully some of you can learn for your own projects. Things to avoid, things to do, things to play with. And trust me, 2,854 feet per second out of a 24-inch barrel is a hot load. I'm glad I wasn't sitting behind that one. But we're learning some things. That's all I wanted to do is just pass on some learn. Hopefully it's fun to watch.